Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us for our first Library and Archives lunch hour of the year, the shared journey of CENTRO and the Schomburg. This Library and Archives lunch hour is a collaborative effort with the Schomburg Center for Research in Black Culture, a research library dedicated to the collection and preservation of Black life in America and a partner of CENTRO. Today's lunch hour focuses on our shared resources and primary sources, detailing the intersectional history of Black Americans and Afro-Puerto Ricans. With us today is Barry Brown, the Associate Curator of the Manuscripts, Archive, and Rare Books Division at the Schomburg, Centro Library Manager Anibal Arocho, and Centro Digital Archivist Lindsay Whitwer. We hope you enjoy this wonderful conversation.
Hey, everybody. Hi, Barry.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yep.
Yes. Oh, I can't turn my video on. Oh, there we go. Let's see. Can you see me now? Oh, great.
So, Barry, we're so happy that we can finally have this conversation here today. We had talked. We've met and we've talked about finding ways to collaborate and build a deeper connection between our mutual institutions. And there is a lot, in our conversations, there is a lot shared between the Centro Library and Archives and the Schomburg Center. So we would like to provide you an opportunity to, share what the Schomburg Center is all about and some of the resources that you have, and then we can discuss some of the intersections between our two institutions. And we're not that far from one another, so like if you are making a visit to Schomburg, you can walk about 30 minutes or so, and then you get to Centro, and vice versa. If you're at Centro and you want to check out Schomburg, on a nice day, it's a very pleasant walk.
Yeah, the last time I came to visit, I actually walked over to see you. So
right on. Yeah, that's great.
Yeah. So again, it's so wonderful to be here. Again, my name is Barry Brown. I'm the Associate Curator of Manuscripts, Archives, and Rare Books at the Schomburg Center. So just to give you a brief introduction, really to build off the introduction that Kimberly gave, the Schomburg Center for Research in Black Culture is one of 3 research libraries, part of the New York Public Library system. And we are located in Harlem. We're on the corner of Malcolm X and 135th. And as Kimberly said before, we are a research library devoted to the preservation, exhibition, and also access of materials related to the global Black experience. So the Schomburg Center is comprised of 5 distinct research divisions based on format. So those divisions are our Art and Artifacts division, Moving Image and Recorded Sound division, our Photographs and Prints division. We have a General Research and Reference division, and that's a division that collects published materials such as serials, published books. They also provide access to e-resources. And last but not least, you have my division, the Manuscripts, Archives, and Rare Books division, which, as the name suggests, that is what we collect as a format: manuscripts, archives, and rare books. So basically, my division is focused on collecting those primary source materials that document and reflect the lived experiences of people of African descent globally. Currently, our collection, we are at about 1,000 collections right now, which if I remember correctly, I think our metrics are now maybe about 7,000 linear feet, for our archival collections here in the Manuscripts, Archives, and Rare Books division. So that's kind of the size of our collection, but we collect, the papers of individuals and, luminaries such as James Baldwin, Malcolm X, Lorraine Hansberry, Maya Angelou. Those are some of our most well-known and most requested materials. But of course, we have the papers of our namesake, Arturo Schomburg, which, we'll get into his collection a little bit later on in the conversation. But we also collect the papers of organizations. Of course, we maintain our own institutional records of the Schomburg Center. and of course, like our rare book collection, which actually grew out of the purchase of Arturo Schomburg's personal library in 1926. So that is what we refer to as his seed library, because that is, what started our rare book collection to grow. So yeah, I mean, it's really an amazing collection. I'm learning so much each and every day. And I can't wait to learn a little bit more about, all of the overlap, like in our collections. I know there's so much. So yeah, I'll just stop for now.
So Barry, for people that aren't familiar with Arturo Schomburg, can you provide us sort of a background of who he was, where he was from, and his impact on the Harlem community?
Yeah, so besides being our namesake, I think Arturo Schomburg is most well known as a bibliophile and collector of materials reflecting the African diaspora. He was also a writer, historian. For many of us here who work at the Schomburg, he was an activist, he was a revolutionary, a visionary, so ahead of his time, in terms of collecting. So Arturo Schomburg was born in Puerto Rico in 1874, and he moved to New York in, I believe, around like 1891. So maybe he was 17 or 18 at the time. And once he got here, he became involved in, a number of different political organizations. One of the organizations that's standing out the most to me, but also that we have, collection material related to this is Las Dos Antillas. So we have those meeting minutes here at the Schomburg. So Las Dos Antillas was a political club that was focused on the liberation of Puerto Rico and Cuba from Spain. So Arturo Schomburg was one of the founders of this organization in 1892, and it was active all the way until 1898, around the kind of time of the Spanish-American War. But even after that, Arturo Schomburg, became involved in even more organizations devoted to, not only like civil rights and liberation, but also, like active scholarship, and knowledge production related to Black history and culture. So that is certainly a little bit about Arturo Schomburg. Again, our namesake. I can also say this too, in terms of just what motivated him to collect. It really stemmed from his childhood in Puerto Rico. He actually had a teacher tell him, when he was in elementary school, that Black people such as himself, they had no history and culture. So that is what really set him on his journey to collect these materials to prove this teacher wrong. And later on, he would write an essay that he was most well known for. It's called The Negro Digs Up His Past. And that was published in 1925. And in that essay, that is the most clear articulation of Arturo Schomburg's collecting vision. But he calls, the items that he collects vindicating evidences, to really just prove this teacher wrong, that people who look like him, who have this ancestry from, Africa, like they do have a rich, history and culture. So again, I'll stop from there.
I think that offers a really great jumping off point to think about Centro's collections. Really, we not only the collections that, really touched upon the Black and Afro-Puerto Rican experience, but also just that kind of feeling of being in the archive. We have so many people who come through who see having their culture, their communities represented in an archive as really validating their lived experience and their culture and community. We also have a significant number of items in our collection that mention Schomburg and the Schomburg Center, which I think is really fabulous. Not only mentioning him as a person and his connection to some of our collections, but also the center as we look to various collections around activism and research and everything. I think for us and for you guys, one of the real core connections is the Puerto Belpré collection that we have here at Centro.
Yes. Yeah.
Being the first Puerto Rican librarian in the NYPL system, and also the fact that you have the records, of her professional life as a librarian at the 135th branch. I don't know if you want to tell us a little bit more about that.
Yeah. So that is another actually quite heavily used collection, the 135th Street branch records. So let's see, just to give you a little bit of background. So the Schomburg Center for Research in Black Culture, it was not always a research library of the New York Public Library. We actually started out as a special collection within a branch library, and that branch library just so happened to be the 135th Street Branch Library, located here in Harlem. So a little history around that branch is that, in the kind of like early 1920s, really, during that kind of, Harlem Renaissance period, you start to see, changing demographics in Harlem. And you start to see a much larger influx of, Black people coming from the South, but also like, people coming from the Caribbean, also people coming from Africa. Harlem was really the place to be, in the 1920s, especially if you are a person of African descent, So the library at that time, made a decision, as all, great libraries should, to want to have more materials that reflect the communities that you're serving, So they start to acquire more and more books, related to Black history and culture. So in 1925, that is when, kind of like the precursor to the Schomburg Center was established. So it was called the Division of Negro History, Literature, and Prints. So in 1925, that's when that, kind of special collections within a branch library was established. And then the following year in 1926, that is when Arturo Schomburg's seed collection, his personal library, was actually purchased by the New York Public Library. So again, like that speaks to that growth, but also again, wanting to serve the community. But getting back to Puerto Belpré, she was actually hired by the 135th branch in the 1920s. She predominantly worked in the children's room. And what I can say in terms of like looking through those records, because we actually have the children's room reports from like the early 1920s to, I think like, into the 30s. I'll have to check the dates again, but it's like I've actually seen mentions of her and also her work in terms of acquiring Spanish language books for children, because there was certainly a growing population of Puerto Ricans, in Harlem, but also other Spanish-speaking communities. So, like you can see that reflected in those children's room reports, but also just, speaking to her amazing work of bilingual storytelling. So that's another thing that you would find in the 135th Street branch records. In terms of like her career here, I think that maybe around like 1929, that is when she was transferred out of the 135th Street branch to the 115th Street Library, because there was, again, a large demand for Spanish-speaking librarians and also books. So yeah.
Yeah, what was interesting to me when looking up the history of Puerto Belpré was the fact that she did see that need for Spanish language programming, and it's in central Harlem where you don't traditionally associate there being a large Hispanic population, Spanish speaking population. And I think that's one of the areas of the Puerto Rican studies that is critically understudied, is that first generation of immigrants that came, prior to World War II. And a lot of them did settle in Harlem prior to the movement into what is traditionally considered the enclave of Puerto Rican migration, East Harlem. And you have, I think what sort of unifies, I think, the Black and the Puerto Rican experience is that in many cases, both Blacks and Puerto Ricans were given the second class level of citizenship.
Absolutely.
So I think there was a level of advocacy within that community that drew them to one another. You had Blacks and Puerto Ricans that served on similar community organizations. They were artisans. They crossed paths in Harlem, and you had what was the beginning of the Harlem Renaissance, and you had Harlem as a center for artists and intellectuals and thinkers, and that includes Pura Belpré when she arrived at the 135th Street bench, and there is documentation of her saying that she was beginning to see the seeds of a renaissance. Like she was very aware of what was going on culturally in Harlem at the time. You can even say, she was a member of the Harlem Renaissance because there were so many
she was. Absolutely.
artists
Absolutely.
and writers that used the 135th Street branch as a base, as a hub for their cultural and intellectual meetings. They drew from the resources in order to produce some of the seminal work of American literature.
Yeah.
I was doing some background research, and one of the things that someone had mentioned, a scholar had mentioned, was that in many cases, Pura Belpré's adaptation of Pérez and Martina can be seen as a allegory for the relationship between Blacks and Puerto Ricans in Harlem at the time, considering also that Pura married a Black man.
That's right, which we also, and that's always like such an interesting connection to me, because we are actually like literally married through our collections, like CENTRO and Schomburg.
Yeah,
multiple times.
Yeah.
Multiple times, that's right. Because the thing is, like for those of you that are watching now and who don't know, so CENTRO has the papers of Pura Belpré, and the Schomburg Center has the papers of her husband, Clarence Cameron White, who was he was a pretty well-known Black composer and also concert violinist. So in the Clarence Cameron White papers, there's actually maybe like a folder or two, related specifically to Pura Belpré, but also like her involvement in helping her husband with his kind of like business affairs and things like that. And actually another, kind of interesting detail, like about, these collections, especially on a related note. So I didn't realize at the time until my visit, and then, coming back and looking at the Clarence Cameron White, I didn't realize that Pura Belpré lived at 409 Edgecombe, which, is a very famous, building in terms of, Harlem history, Black history. That was a building that during that time period, you had a lot of, famous and well-known Black, artists, luminaries, scholars. You had Aaron Douglas lived there, Thurgood Marshall lived there, Walter White lived there. I mean, like that was like the building, like the place to be. And we also actually have the 409 Edgecombe, it's like the Tenants Association kind of like papers and records. And that's a really, really interesting and fascinating collection, just if you want to get a sense of like, just the lives of everyday people, so I would certainly like recommend that collection. There are definitely some characters in that collection, just FYI. So, I mean, like, I always love collections like that. It's a really fun collection. So, yeah.
Yeah, I feel like recognizing the connection, the strong connection with the marriages of our two collections, his collection really fills in some pieces that we don't have of her collection. I feel like during her marriage, we don't have a ton of documentation of that period. And I
Interesting.
think sometimes the narrative has been from our perspective, or from what I've seen, or how people might interpret it, is that like she gets taken away from the Puerto Rican community because she's in that marriage. But I think when you look at it from seeing it in the context of the work that she's doing at 135th, and then her marriage and all the work that she did, and how strong an influence that had on her later career, her growth as a folklorist and an artisan. It paints just such a more beautiful, fuller picture that I think it's wonderful if people want to come see her collection here. Like, you kind of have to go see there's collection to really get that full perspective of her as a person and him as a person as well.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And if you want information about her as her career, you know, and the work that she did at 135th and the type of programming and that was happening at 135th, I think it's integral. And again, this is like if you want the full picture, you need to visit our respective institutions.
Both places. Yeah. Yeah. And, and I also think too, it's such a shame that Puro Belpre and Arturo Schomburg were not here at the same time. So it's like they kind of sort of like just miss each other. So, as Puro Belpre is like leaving 135th in like 1929, like Schomburg doesn't come back to the New York Public Library until 1932. And that's actually when he served as the first curator of his own collection, the Schomburg collection. And he served from 1932 until his death in 1938. So yeah, so they just missed each other. So yeah.
And the fact that they're essentially a generation removed from one another. So, and they're both very integral to explaining what that early migration to New York was like for a lot of these Puerto Ricans. You see that they tend to be people who are more well off than what you consider the traditional migrants who came here en masse post World War II. We know Pura came here. It's because she had family that was getting married here, and then she decided to stay and was able to find an opportunity to get a white collar job, which was like really rare. It was very difficult to do for a woman of color. And that's a part of the migration experience that I don't think that many people really know about. And it's something that's like pretty fascinating when you start to think about who those pioneers were that came and what they meant, and sort of the outsized influence they had on their communities, and the influence that they continue to have to present day. Can you tell me, like, just like, I don't mean to put you on the spot here, but just like, what are like 2 or 3 of the top like research collections that people like to use at Schomburg?
Oh my gosh. Yeah. So I would say again, like the most heavily requested, it would be the James Baldwin, the Malcolm X, and probably Lorraine Hansberry would probably be like the top 3. But I will say that in, kind of recent, like more within the last like year or so, people really are starting to request not only Schomburg's papers a little bit more, but also the Schomburg Center records. Because we are gearing up for our centennial celebration. So I think that there are people that are aware of that. Of course, the staff, like we're very excited, to be able to do this work for 100 years. So our centennial celebration is, 2025 and 2026. So those 2 pillars represent, so in 1925, the establishment of the Negro Division of History, Literature, and Prints, and in 1926, the purchase of Arturo Schomburg's personal library. And I will just say too, like when I came to visit last year, I recall that Centro was also celebrating a big milestone and anniversary, your 50th, right? 1972.
Right, yeah.
And then, for 1972 for us, that marks the year that we became a research library. So also that overlap and that kind of shared experience, with our collections as well. So yeah, it's really cool.
Yeah.
That was really great. We're gonna start taking some questions, if that's okay, Barry. You ready?
Sure,
You ready
sure.
for some Q&A?
Yeah.
So sorry if anyone has any questions for Barry, Lindsay, or myself about Centro or about Schomburg Center, about anything that we've talked about today, or not, if you have any additional questions, please put them in the Q&A box. You might have been noticing as the conversation was going on, there have been links that are posted in the chat. So feel free to check out those links, bookmark them for later. They have information about the Schomburg Center, information about Centro's holdings, our digital collections, and our a database of our archives, where you can see where Schomburg fits into
Mhm.
the Centro archives. So this is a pretty pertinent question, Barry.
Mhm.
Any thoughts on the recent silencing of African history with the AP African Studies ban? Can we imagine what action Schomburg would have taken to speak out against this ban?
Oh my gosh. Whoever asked that question, I think about that all the time. It keeps me up at night because this is the very thing and the reason, why Schomburg did what he did and why he began to collect. I think all of these efforts are, an attack against our humanity. It's a continued, way to try to dehumanize, but also not really fully wanting to deal with or reckon with the past, in any substantial way, so to really keep people ignorant, but to also, take away from, the, history and, like, again, like cultural and knowledge production, happening, that is rooted in the Black diaspora. So, I mean, I think it's definitely an attack on the work that we do each and every day, like the work here at Schomburg and also the work at Centro. So, like this is not lost on me. It really lights a fire in me. Like it reinvigorates me, to, kind of like do more, in terms of like what we do each and every day, in the library, with collecting, with making sure that these resources are always, readily available and accessible to the public. Like I think that that's part of why Arturo Schomburg sold his, library to the New York Public Library because it is so accessible. He wanted his collections to be used by the public. He wanted people to be educated, but, he also wanted, especially people of African descent, he wanted us to know, that, our lives have meaning, they have value, we have contributed significantly, it's like you need to know this history, and other people need to know it as well. So yeah, no, I mean, again, it's very worrying, it's very concerning.
Yeah, I mean, and I think knowledge production and the dissemination of knowledge is that can always really, it's highly politicized,
Mhm.
and people try to control it for their own separate political agendas. But that's where institutions like ours come in, and like, we have that core evidentiary material in our
Absolutely.
collections that you can't deny, right?
Absolutely. The
So
vindicating evidence is that
absolutely.
Schomburg, that's what he called it. So yeah.
um is another interesting question here. Are you having higher interest of people visiting the Schomburg now that Afro-Latinos are no longer silenced, ignored, or marginalized, but are rather embracing their Afro-Latinidad? Um, are you getting more interest of people who are going to Schomburg Center to learn more about Afro-Latin stuff?
We do, and especially in terms of just on an academic level, in terms of the conceptualization of what it means to be Afro-Latin. Like what does that identity actually mean?
Mhm.
And again, just taking it back to Schomburg, like you will find in his papers, in his writings, in his correspondence, he you know, always refers to himself as like Afro-Boricua, like always, like never, you know, like one or the other, you know, like always embracing that identity. So we have had, you know, like a lot more people doing research, you know, in terms of investigating like that identity and what does it mean. So yeah, so that's a great question. I mean, for sure, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you have these ethnic groups that are
Hmm.
overlapping, and there's a lot of nuance there as well
Yeah,
because you have the racial element, and then you also have like the colorist element too, because
absolutely.
even within communities of color,
Hmm.
there tend to be those biases and those hierarchies that are created by how light your skin is, for instance. Um,
Yeah. I mean, and also too, you know, like again, I won't get too complicated because again, like this is not, you know, my research area, but I've had, you know, researchers even, you know, interrogate, you know, just in terms of Schomburg's identity. But you know, like sometimes like his choice to use Arturo rather than Arthur or Arthur rather than Arturo. So even, you know, interrogating that identity in such a deep way. Yeah, I mean, it's been very interesting, you know, to kind of look at these research trends. So yeah.
okay, here's another question. Do you know, Barry, do you know if Arturo Schomburg was an artist as well in addition to collecting art, or was he just strictly a collector?
I don't I don't think that he was an artist. I mean, or at least there's no evidence, you know, like in any of his papers, but for sure he collected art. And I will say, you know, again, if any of you have a chance to visit the Schomburg Center, there is an amazing piece. It's bronze and marble. It's done circa, I think, like 1860s. It's a bust of Ira Aldridge as Othello. And it is a very like kind of like iconic imagery of the Schomburg Center. I wish I had a visual for you right now, but I mean, it is quite a stunning piece. From what I've heard from just stories, you know, from people visiting the Schomburg over the years, that bust actually used to be located in the lobby. And when people would walk in, they would think that it was Black Jesus because it does kind of look like that. But I was like, it's actually not Black Jesus. That is Ira Aldridge as Othello. So,
Pretty
so
great.
yeah. But that was one of his earliest pieces of art collected. But certainly he collected paintings, sculptures, you know, you name it, he collected it.
Okay, I think we've got time for another couple of questions, and we're going to start wrapping it up. Someone asks, are his descendants alive and part of the center?
Oh yes, absolutely. So actually one of his grandsons, like he comes to the Schomburg all the time, Mr. Dean Schomburg. We actually just had a Black History Month kickoff this past Friday, and Mr. Dean Schomburg was there. So it's always great to see him. And then there are some other little Schomburgs running around, like they're I guess these would be like great, maybe great great grandchildren of Schomburg. And actually, one of the great great grandchildren that I met a few years ago, he was enrolled in our Junior Scholars Program here at the Schomburg. So that is an after school program for kids that are of, I think, like middle school and high school age that are looking to learn more about Black history and culture. So that's also something that we offer as well.
All right.
That's really cool.
That's
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
really interesting. Barry, now we'd like to give you a chance to share with the audience here how they can go about conducting research at the Schomburg Center, best way to contact you, or and anything cool that's coming up. So yeah, let us have it.
Sure. Yeah. So, yeah, I mean, the Schomburg Center, we're always here. You know, in terms of getting into the Schomburg to see some of the collections, unfortunately, at this time, my division, Manuscripts, Archives, and Rare Books, is by appointment only. That is a bit of a kind of like a late, you know, like it's from the pandemic, you know, so it's still kind of like in place, but hopefully we can start to accept walk-ins again. But for now, it's by appointment only. If you go to schomburg.org. That will give you more information about the entire Schomburg, but if you click on the tab that says research, you'll see each division's hours and also how to make appointments with them. But even if you just want to walk in and visit the Schomburg, our exhibitions are open to the public, Monday through Saturday. And also our research and reference division, located downstairs on the court level, they are always open, no appointment necessary if you want to just, browse some books, look at different, magazines. You can, look at the microfilm collections that are downstairs. So that's no appointment required. But for the other divisions, like I said, all of that information is on schomburg.org.
That's great. And any interesting programming down the pipe?
Oh gosh, yeah. So we have a concert coming up from the Harlem Chamber Players. I'm forgetting the date right now. I'm so sorry. Yeah, but we always have public programming going on. Again, like all of that information is also on schomburg.org. But again, like the biggest thing for us, like we as the staff, we're just really gearing up and planning for our centennial celebration. So that is really, gosh, those are going to be some incredible kind of back-to-back years for us. So, plans certainly forthcoming for sure. So just stay tuned, continue to check our website, also follow us on the many different social media platforms that we're on for like more updates. But that's kind of what's coming up for now. So yeah, it's actually like too many things like all the time. Even right now, like we have 2 exhibitions that, they're up right now, but they will be leaving pretty soon. So if you can catch them, please do. The first one is called Been Seen. And that is a photograph exhibition featuring the photography of, Harlem studio photographer Austin Hanson. So that's amazing. And then we also have in our main exhibition gallery, 10-year celebration of our Black Comic Books Festival. So the Black Comic Books Festival is actually taking place this year in April. Normally it's in January, but I think that April is a much better time in terms of weather-wise. So, hopefully I'll see many of you out there, at the Black Comic Festival. And also at that time, we'll be having another exhibition called Marking Time, Art in the Age of Mass Incarceration. So that is another one too. Again, like it's just so many things. It's like always something going on at the Schomburg. Again, like our tagline is where Black History Month is every month. So if you want, any type of exposure to Black history and culture, please, the Schomburg is always here. Our talk today, in terms of our overlap, once you stop by Schomburg, go to Centro, so so yeah, so many things.
And to anyone who's interested in reaching out to Centro, you can reach us at our email address is centro.library@hunter.cuny.edu, and you can email us with any questions about anything that you've heard here today, or any questions in general about the Center for Puerto Rican Studies or about our different collections here. If you would like to make an appointment to come view archival collections, that is also on our webpage. You just need to fill out a really simple form, and then someone will be in contact with you right away, so you can come and visit Centro, and then make the half-hour walk to go visit the Schomburg. And all of our friends over there who are doing so much work and tirelessly working to continue the legacy of people like Pura Bre, of people like Arturo Schomburg, to protect the evidence as we see, because our knowledge is constantly under attack. The truth is constantly under attack, and we just need to make sure we preserve that history for future generations. Barry, thank you so much. This has been a lot of fun. I'm really happy that our institutions are able to cooperate, and we hope to have some more programming with all of us in the future.
I hope this is the first of many. So,
Absolutely.
So thanks everyone for attending our first library lunch hour of 2023. It was I think we started with a great one. For people that couldn't make it, these are uploaded to our YouTube channel as well. And if you missed any of previous library lunch hours, you can go to our YouTube channel and see the archived versions. And we hope to have some really great programming, some other cool guests coming in the coming months. And thank you all for participating. Thank you all for taking this moment of your day to learn a little bit more about Centro and about the Schomburg Center. Have a good rest of your day.
thanks. Bye-bye.